Today I am reading from the 11th book in the Left Behind series. The name of this book is Armageddon. I'm reading chapter 9 today. Let me scout the area, Buck said. Make sure they're clear to land. George, behind the wheel of the Hummer, shot Buck a sideward glance. Nobody was in the area when we left the compound. There's been no one suspicious along the way, and no one followed us. We came the last half mile in the dirt, using the lights only to make sure we were on track. Buck, the airstrip is as secure as it's ever been. Buck sighed and shook his head. When did I become the cautious one? You're the military guy. There's cautious and prepared, and there's paranoid, Sebastian said. I know they've got Chloe, but that wasn't because of some vast stakeout. It was her fault. I'm sorry, but your father in law said she admitted that herself, and she has a history of venturing out. But why was she out? I saw guys. She must have seen them too, and they got her. Routine reconnaissance. You said yourself they looked bored. Well, they're not bored now, are they? No, Buck, they're not bored in now. I'm parking at the end of the runway. You want to go traipsing around in the woods till they get here. Be my guest. You're not coming? You're the boss. If you tell me to come, I'll come. But you distinctly said, let me scout the area. Well, I'm letting you scout the area. Come with me. You're making me? I'm asking you as a friend. That's not fair, Buck. Don't play that card. Come on, what if I find something? You'll never forgive yourself. You're incurable. Buck knew Sebastian was right. The fact was, he was frazzled and needed something to do. He was ready to head straight to San Diego GC headquarters, guns blazing, and bust Chloe out. You know Rayford will be up for going after Chloe, Buck said as they tramped through the woods in their fatigues, Uzis at their sides. Come on, he and Mac will have just spent nearly 16 hours in the air, probably splitting the pilot duties. These guys are going to need to sack out. You know Mac's heard about Albie. He'll be wired and ready to go. He'll be looking to get back to Albazra and find out what happened. Anyway, Buck, even if we do plan a raid, when are we going to do it? And who's going to get our people to Petra in the meantime? I thought Rayford was getting Lionel on that. Lionel will organize and supply it, sure, but we've got to lead these people and see the work gets done. Buck slapped a mosquito. What are we doing? There's nothing out here. Whose idea was this anyway? You hear a jet? No. Now we're out here like you said, so let's do a job. Now you want to look for something. I just don't want to waste time, that's all. Let's not get too far from the landing strip. Buck was suddenly swarmed by bugs. He let his Uzi dangle and smacked his head and face with both hands. Let's get out in the open. They emerged at about the midpoint of the strip. Now we're going to have to go all the way down to that end when they got here, George said. When they get here. Let's head that way now, Buck said. You can occupy your time helping me plan the attack. On GC headquarters? Where else? What do you know about the place? What do you mean? We've been past there. You've seen it. Buck, neither of us has ever been inside. I know it's 4 floors plus a basement, but I don't even know if they use the basement for prisoners, do you? Nope, but I remember they have bars on the windows down there. Well, that's good. That's helpful. But the more you know, the more you should realize you don't know. What kind of GI mumbo jumbo is that? The big man stopped. All right, George said. Look, here's my take on San Diego GC headquarters. I know it's one of the biggest in North America, and I have no idea how many personnel they have. Do you? No. Of the 4 floors and the basement, I don't know which house is the jail. Do you? No. I'm guessing they segregate men and women prisoners, but I don't know for sure. Do you? No. Well, if they do, are they all on the same floor or different floors? Couldn't tell you. You see where we are, Buck? Nowhere. A military operation, especially a surprise first attack, is a complicated, highly planned maneuver. We'd have one objective and one only, and that is to get Chloe out alive. To accomplish that, we'd have to have someone inside. We can't get someone inside. Then how are we going to do this, Buck? Think, man. Think what we'd have to know before we go charging in there. Do they keep high profile prisoners separate from the general population? And if they do, where? All right, you've made your point. I haven't even started, Buck. You guys are all enamored with my military training, but you don't know the half of it. Most of this is just common sense. Besides knowing exactly where Chloe is, we'd have to know the shortest distance in and out. We'd have to know what doors or windows might be vulnerable. We'd have to know how much firepower we'd need. And Buck, you tell me what that means. What will determine our munitions needs? The size and strength of the doors and windows? Well, that, yeah, but it's their personnel, buddy. How many of them are we going to run into, and what will their resources be? If you could tell me Chloe was in the northeast corner of the second floor and how much GC I'd have to get through to get there, then how many are guarding her and what kind of weapons they are toting, I might be able to plan a mission for you. Otherwise, we're messing around guessing, and we're likely to get a strike mission force wiped out. They reached the end of the runway and sat in the grass in the darkness. And how does anybody ever pull off a raid like that? George cradled his weapon in his lap. It's never easy, but there are prerequisites, and in the good old days when people weren't identified by a mark, you could usually get somebody into a place. Somebody has to have a thorough working knowledge of the building, maybe even access to the blueprint, the floor plan, the utility systems. I can't just do nothing, George. What are we going to do? Buck saw the landing lights before he heard the roar of the Gulfstream's engines. He signaled with a powerful flashlight that the area was clear, and within minutes the plane was down and hidden, and Rayford and Mac were disembarking. The four shook hands without a word, then Buck and Rayford embraced. Neither was much for showing emotion, but they held each other tight for longer than Buck could remember doing before. They loaded the Hummer, but before they got in, Max said, I feel 20 years older. Do we have to sit in a cramped space again right away? We're in no hurry, Rayford said. Stretch your legs. I don't mind getting back in a little late anyway, Buck said. We've had no GC activity today, but they'll be snooping around later for sure. Rayford said, You don't suppose Chloe got them started in a whole new direction by claiming she was 30 miles from home? Buck chuckled. Hardly, but you got to hand it to her for trying. Actually, it'll be interesting to see where they are tonight. They should give us an idea where they picked her up. Now you're thinking, George said. It'll also give us an idea how long it'll take them to discover the compound and how much time we've got to get out of there. I really mustn't be gone too long, Naomi said. Chang sat with her beside a pillar that made up part of the portico in the courtyard of the urn tomb. Now, if I had someone like you who could fill in for me, I could be gone longer. But with who? He said, and she laughed. Seriously, though, I'm curious about your background. I love remembering, Chang, though it is also a sad story. My father was a businessman, a restaurateur. He owned several eateries in the area around Teddy Kollek Stadium. Do you know Jerusalem? No. He was honest and good, and people liked him, respected him. That is very important in my culture. Mine too. I suppose in all cultures, a person's reputation is paramount. But my father took great pride in his many friends and his successful businesses. He provided well for my mother and me. He was also a devoutly religious man, and so our family was too. Synagogue every Sabbath. We knew the scriptures. We loved God. I believe my father was proud of that, but not in a bad way. You know what I mean. Chang nodded. About 8 years ago, this was when I was 11, my mother fell ill. Cancer. Cancer of the, well, you'll forever forgive me if I am too shy to mention it. We do not know each other well enough for me to be comfortable about it. It's all right. She was very ill. My father was so good to her. He had the money to hire help for her, full time help, but he would not do that. He hired part time help, but he cut his workday in half and spent every afternoon and all night with her. He was a wonderful example to me and made me want to help even more. We loved my mother, consider it a privilege to serve her the way she had served us for so many years. He made her happy despite her pain. He seems like a wonderful man. Oh, he is, Chang. He always has been. Even before, well, just after my 12th birthday, my mother, she took a turn for the worse, and he had to put her in the hospital. The doctors told him there was no hope, but my father did not believe in no hope. He believed in God. He told the doctors and anyone who wanted to grieve my mother too early that would show them. He and his little girl would show them, and how we were going to show them. We were going to pray, and God was going to work, and my mother was going to be healed. Chang heard the anguish in Naomi's voice, and then she fell silent. It's okay, he said. You can finish another time. No, she said, wiping her eyes. It's just that it does not seem so long ago now. I can finish. I want to. One night, my father came home from the hospital late, and he was upset. I did not go with him on school nights, only in the afternoons. I asked him, Father, what is it? Is mother worse? And he said, no, but she might as well be. That frightened me. He had never had a cross word with her, never said a bad thing about her, at least not in front of me. But she told him something that he said was only because of all the drugs she had been prescribed. She wept and told him that wasn't true, that she really believed it. I said, What, Father, what? But he burst into tears and said he had raised his voice and told her that she should stop talking nonsense. I made her weep, he told me, crying his eyes out. The woman I love with all my soul who is dying before my eyes. I upset her. And I said, But Father, she upset you too. What did she say? He said, She told me Jesus is Messiah. I demanded to know where she had heard such hearsay, but she would not tell me for fear I would get someone in trouble, which I would have. I did not know what to think, I gasped when he repeated what she had said. He told me that he had told her that he would not allow me to see her again if she kept up with such nonsense, but that only made me cry. That very night we were called to the hospital, told that if we wanted to see her alive, we must come now. All the way he wept and blamed himself for being cross with her. I caused this, he said over and over. He pleaded with God to spare her, made promises to him. I had never seen him so pitiful. We were with her when she died, her last words to us, and they were to us both, Chang, because she looked directly into my eyes and spoke, and then she looked at my father and said the same thing. Her last words were, I go to be with God. Study the prophecies, study the prophecies. Wow, I did not come to Jesus in the way you might think. The tidy conclusion might be that my father and I went home and studied the prophecies and came to believe the way my mother did, but it didn't happen that way. My father was so heartbroken that he became angry with God and quit studying the scriptures at all. We stopped praying. We stopped going to synagogue. He still loved me and took care of me, but he tried to lose himself in his work. His friends only pitied him because he was not the same man he had been. I could not get my mother's last words out of my head, but my father forbade me to study anything in the Bible, let alone the prophecies. I was sad, so sad, because my life had changed radically with the loss of my mother and really the loss of my father as I had known him. Whenever I suggested that God could help us, or the synagogue might comfort us, or we might find some answers in the Bible, he would not hear of it. I was 13 when the disappearances happened. That got everyone's attention, even my father's. Scared to death, we turned back to God, back to synagogue, back to the scriptures. I began studying the prophecies, and though I was young, I couldn't avoid seeing what Mother had seen when someone pointed them out to her. My father wouldn't admit it, but I think he started to see it too. When we heard that she renowned biblical scholar, Dr. Tyson Ben Judah, was going to speak on international television about his conclusion about Messiah from the Bible prophecies, we watched it together. The next day, everyone was talking about the trouble Dr. Ben Judah had gotten himself into by declaring that Messiah had already come. But my dad and I were excited about more than that. He found a New Testament, and we began reading it every night. When we got to the story of the Jewish man Saul, who became Paul, my father was overwhelmed. We read faster and faster and more, and we came to believe that Jesus was Messiah and that he could save us from our sins. We memorized 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. Brethren, I declare to you the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, in which you stand, by which also you are saved, if you hold fast that word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures. All my father and I wanted to do was what Paul had done: receive that truth by which Paul said we could be saved. We didn't know what to say or do, so we just prayed and told God we believed it and wanted to receive it. It was weeks before we read enough and knew enough to understand what we had done and what it all meant. Father finally found in the back of the New Testament a guide to salvation that talked about accepting and believing and confessing. We studied what it called the road to salvation, all those verses that tell that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, that the wages of sin is death, but that the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Chang said, looking at her. It's always something different, he said. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard about people becoming believers, and each one is unique. I mean, they all get to the same place, but for some, it was the disappearances. For you, it was your mother, really. We just can't wait to see her again, Chang, and it won't be long. Chloe couldn't tell whether she had actually been dozing or was zoned out when Florence made a loud entrance about midnight. She unceremoniously poked the energy bar through the cage and let it drop. Chloe wanted to leap on it, tear it open, and gobble it down, but her pride was still working. She turned to look, but she didn't move. Dinner, honey, Florence said. I recommend a white wine like tap water. Chloe didn't move until she left. She ate half the bar, which was flat and tasteless. But Chloe had always been told the greatest seasoning was hunger. She wrapped the rest, determined to save it for breakfast. But the few calories she had just ingested merely triggered her appetite. She was able to hold out for about another half hour, then ate the rest. Though she was still hungry, the bar had taken enough of the edge off that she was able to doze. She dreamed first of her family. Buck and Kenny were close enough to smell, but she couldn't reach to hold them, to touch or kiss them. Then images danced of their horrified faces, repulsed by her. Did she have the mark? Was she hideously ugly? They grimaced and turned away. Chloe ran to a mirror and found herself headless. She fainted, and when she hit the floor, she woke up. She sat on the cot, her face in her hands, rocking. This was going to be harder than she had ever imagined. She would not for an instant be fooled or even tortured into giving the GC an iota of what they wanted. She just prayed that if she was not going to be sprung somehow, and she couldn't imagine how anyone could pull that off. Her execution would be quick. I've come to a hard decision, Buck, Rayford said. It was 2 o'clock in the morning in the underground compound. Rayford sat with Buck in Rayford's quarters where Buck would spend the night. Ming was staying at his and Chloe's place so Kenny could be in his own bed. Sebastian and a young associate were on watch. I don't want to hear it, do I? Buck said. Probably not. But for some reason, God put me in this position. And even though I'm biased and have almost as much vested interest as you do, I need to take leadership on this one. Mac is asleep. When he is fully rested, he's going to Wisconsin to pick up Zeke. He'll drop him in Petra to start work on our next assignment. Buck hung his head. Our next assignment is not right here. Hear me out. Mac is going to go on to clear out of Al-Basra and move to Petra. On the way, I'll have him call Otto Weiser, the guy I told you about. He'll be in the palace and should be able to dig up what's going on in Al-Hila. Carpathia's assistant knows Nikolai's planning a meeting in Baghdad of the 10 heads of state from around the world. We believe that's when he'll add all the other regions' manpower to the armies he's already marshaling in Israel. Dad, I'm sorry, but I don't really care about anywhere but right here at the moment. It looks like everything is coming together for all kinds of activity over there. But meanwhile, we're hanging Chloe out to dry. Buck, we've both been without sleep way too long. Believe me, I've done as much crying and praying and worshiping as you have, which is, I doubt that, exhausting. I need to rest, and so do you. Dad, I'm not going to be able to sleep. I didn't say anything about sleeping. Get your clothes off, stretch out, put your feet up, give your body a break. Even if you can't turn your brain off, we need you sharp, Buck. You're telling me I'm not going out with George tonight? I'm not even letting George go, Buck. Talk about somebody who don't want to burn out. He's got a good team that can track the GC if they show tonight. All we want to know is where they're starting their canvassing. I'm impressed that people have already started packing, getting ready to go. Lionel's got planes and pilots lined up. We have to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Buck leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. I trust you, Dad, and I know you have Chloe's and my best interest at heart, but I don't get this. When do we start scoping out headquarters? Figuring out how to get in there or how to get next to somebody who would know something about the palace. You and I can see how close we can get tomorrow. If George is available, we'll take him. But time's wasting. Rayford sat back and sighed. Job one with me is conserving resources, and that includes human ones. Our minds tell us we have energy because we can think of nothing else, but running on adrenaline like that will wear us down quicker, make us rash, ineffective. Trust me on this, Buck. I want her out of there as much as you do, but she's not the only person we're accountable for. But I want to know as soon as the reconnaissance party knows anything about... No. Now, I've left word that we are not to be disturbed until mid-morning except in an emergency. Dad, knowing something you can't act on right away, anyway, is no help. Now, no more talk. Let's get some rest. Like everyone else in Petra at high noon, Chang preferred working inside. He had discovered through much trial and error that he was able to tap into everything in New Babylon from where he was. The problem was all the decision makers were gone to Al-Hila. When the plan to beat them there and bug the place had fizzled, he had been assigned to come up with a way that Otto Weiser could feed him information. That all depended on what hardware might have been left that could be tapped from Petra. Chang worried that he might have become too obvious in his interest in Naomi, wanting to spend every spare minute with her. He decided not to assume anything and stayed at his computer over lunchtime. He was hungry, but he could also wait for the evening manna. Chang was thrilled when Naomi approached shyly with a basket. Hey, workaholic, she said. Don't go starving on me. Hi, he said. Brought you some honey wafers. Hell Carpathia had become just part of the background for Chloe by now. She guessed it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. She had tried to keep her ears covered as she dozed, but when she drifted off, her hands fell away. That was why she heard the door and held her breath. From the heavy footsteps and the jangling keys, she could tell it was Florence. What could she want? It sounded as if she was close to the cage, and Chloe smelled food, a burger with all trimmings, and the sound of a straw, probably in a cold soft drink. Right then it all hit Chloe as the nectar of the gods. She slowly turned and in the low light saw Florence sit on the floor and lean back against the cage. Chloe rested on one elbow and let out her breath. You awake? Florence said. Afraid so. Want me to turn off that music? Do you care what I want? Don't be sassing me again. If you really want to know what I want, yes, I want the music off. I'm not all bad, you know, Florence said. She sat next to the cage, her half eaten burger and soft drink, and another tall paper cup with a lid, and moved to the door. The music stopped. When Florence returned, Chloe said, Thank you. Mm-huh, she said, sliding to the floor again. Just having a burger. So I gathered. Brought you something. You did not. See why you want to be that way all the time? Can't a person do something nice for somebody? I wish. Well, your wish has been granted. If you like chocolate, who doesn't? How about a chocolate shake? I'm still dreaming, right? No more music and now a chocolate shake in the middle of the night. What's gotten into you? I told you, ain't all bad. Nobody is. I can think of someone. If you're really going to give me a chocolate shake, all I can say is I'm grateful. I'm a mama too, you know. That's so. Uh huh. Brewster, almost 3. Have a picture? I do. You want to see it, really? Of course I do. Just a minute. Can't get in trouble turning on the lights when it's only just us. She finished her meal, leaving the chocolate shake on the floor while throwing away the trash. Chloe wanted the shake so badly she trembled. Was it possible she could get next to the woman somehow, mother to mother? Florence went out again and turned on the lights. When she returned and shut the door, it clearly locked behind her. When Chloe had already learned what protocol, the shake was not going to fit through the mesh of the cage, so if the cage door was going to be open, and of course the outer door could not be unlocked. But that also told Chloe that Florence was lying about being there alone. Otherwise, how would she get back out? Now, if I unlock the cage, which is totally against the rules, you're not going to pay back my kindness by trying something, are you? I'm bigger and stronger than you, but even if you. Yeah, I know. Heard it from Jock. We're still both locked in. Exactly. So if I behave and take the shake, you lock me back in here. How are you getting out? I buzz them and they let me out. So we're not really alone. Well, no, not after I buzz them. Well, if they see what you gave me, then I'm in trouble. So if you want it, you better take it now. I want it. Stay right where you are. Don't be standing up when this door opens, or I'll be shutting it again. Florence unlocked the cage, handed Chloe the shake, then quickly locked it again. It was the first time Chloe had noticed emotion in her. Florence looked excited, maybe scared, maybe flushed with the feeling of doing something nice when she wasn't supposed to. Chloe sucked eagerly at the straw and was not disappointed. The shake was still cold, thick, rich, and if anything, too chocolatey, which, as she used to laugh about with her friends, was like saying something tasted too rich. Florence stood watching her. Whoa, girl. Remember, you're doing that on an empty stomach. Better pace yourself. I will, and I don't want brain freeze. Florence laughed. And don't forget to show me the pictures of Brewster. Oh, I will, as soon as you're finished. Why not now? Chloe wondered as she attacked the straw again. The sugar and caffeine were going to keep her awake, but it wasn't like she had anything to look forward to in the morning. Maybe Jock would show up and eat his breakfast in front of her again. Jock, she said, giggling. What? Florence said. Eggs in front of me? What you going on about? Jock, Jack, Jick, Jack. Chloe was dizzy. The cup was slipping. She reached with her other hand to steady it, but the shake fell to the floor and splashed. It hit her as the greatest tragedy she could recall, and she began to weep. Her eyes were trying to shut. She forced herself to keep them open and deliberately lifted her chin so she could see Florence, who just stood watching. Florence pressed her buzzer, the outer door opened, and both Nigel and Jock entered, pushing a gurney. I'll get this cleaned up, Florence said, unlocking the cage. Great work, Flo, Jock said. Love the bit about you having a kid. Oh, honey, they easy when they hungry. And that is the end of chapter 9. Next, we'll be reading chapter 10. Thank you for joining me and have a wonderful day.